So in this short clip, I'm going to explain how you construct an external perspective. You've already used a 1-point perspective in setting up a sectional perspective, and the same principles exactly stand for setting up an external perspective, but the only difference is here that we're going to use a 2-point perspective. This method is really well covered in Architectural Graphics by Francis Ching, so I would direct you to chapter 6 on perspective in that book, which is available online in the library. So I'm just going to look at a really straightforward form as a means to just explain the techniques. Once you've got your head around the technique, you can apply this system to any geometry of building within reason. Zaha Hadid's parametric curves would not be easy to set up in this method, but 90% of the time this is a really useful method. Okay, so the first thing that we've got to think about is the station point, where you want the viewer to actually be, where you want the painting to be viewed from, in a sense. So I'm going to set up the perspective using, I'm going to start by setting my viewpoint here where the dot is, and you can very quickly at the start just explore different angles of the building, different rotations of the building, or different viewpoint positions until you find the one that you think is going to give you the best view. Okay, so if that's the station point, the cone of vision that we talk about is going to be within that sort of angle, which should produce a perspective that's quite well or quite realistic and not too distorted. The next thing we want to think about is where the picture plane is going to be. So the picture plane should always touch or intersect with the building at some point, because that means that it becomes the measuring line, or it's the point at which we can scale a height. Only where the picture plane intersects the plan of the building can we scale the height of the building. So in this drawing, the plan and the section here are at the same scale. Okay, so so that's our picture plane, and for the purpose of this drawing we're also going to call this our ground line. And the next thing to do is to set up the horizon line, and the horizon line depends on what height above the ground you want to view the building. So for the most realistic appearance of the building, we would set it at a person's eye height, so at about 1.5 meters. So I will just draw the horizon line here, and this would obviously be scaled when you're working with a scale drawing. This is just a sketch, but when you're working with a plan at a certain scale, you measure up at the same scale to the height. So that is the horizon line. Let's say it's 1.5 meters. And the next thing to do is set up the vanishing points for each of the planes of walls. So I'm going to take a line that's parallel to this set of walls until it touches the picture plane, and then I project upwards to that and call this vanishing point 1. And then I do the same thing for the other set of planes of walls at 90 degrees. Take it up to the horizon line. It's a common mistake not to take it up to the horizon line and to leave it on the picture plane. Make sure you take it to the horizon line. That's sort of the definition of where the vanishing point would be. And if there were any other walls, so for example, if you had somewhere a wall at that angle, you would simply take a line from your viewpoint at that angle until it hit the picture plane, and then up to make a third vanishing point, or however many you need for any walls that were at that angle to the picture plane, but we'll just remove that for now. Okay, so we've got vanishing points, horizon line, station point, and now the next thing is simply to construct the perspective. So the first point I would always draw is the one that's scaled. So I'm going to position the station point so it's directly looking at this corner, and I set up the corner of the wall, looking at the section to see what height that would be. So it's going to be somewhere about there. And then I look towards the other corner. So this is a sight line. Draw the sight line directly, straight line from the station point to the corner, and where it crosses the picture plane, not the horizon line, but where it crosses the picture plane, it's going to appear somewhere there. Okay, and to know the next thing to do is to track the corner back to the vanishing point, the line. And again, if we track this back to the vanishing point, we've got the far corner. And we do the same thing now for the other corner. I draw my sight line directly back to the station point. Where it crosses the picture plane will be where the corner of the building exists. And then I use the second vanishing point, just track it back to the corner and this point here, and that allows me to pick up this corner and this corner. See, it's starting to unfold. The next thing would be to pick up the ridge line. We're going to see the top, the ridge of, or the roof of the building. So again, I would look in plan, take a sight line back to the station point where the ridge actually crosses the picture plane. Again, I project vertically up from that point. Now, at this point, I don't have any corner, as I did before, to use to track back to pick up the corner there. So I have to use the measuring line, which is that corner. That is the measuring line. It's the one place that we can scale from. And I simply take, if I look at the section, and I just measure the height of the ridge above the top of the wall. It's about equidistant, so it's going to be just about here, had the ridge been measured from the measuring line. And then I track that ridge back to the vanishing point, and where it crosses that vertical line is where the ridge actually exists. And then we just connect the two corners. And similarly, take a sight line back to where the end of the roof crosses the picture plane, project that up, and then track the ridge back to the vanishing point here and take the corner up to the top of the ridge. And that means that we've got the roof fixed. And that shows us the outline of the building. And then adding the detail, it's simply a case of picking up all the openings and any details, that kind of thing. So if I'm looking at the window opening, just do that in a red line. If I'm looking at these openings, I'm simply tracking it back in a straight line to the sight point. And I know that where it crosses the picture plane is the point at which the reveals are shown. So this is where it gets a little bit fiddly because it's small. If you're doing it on CAD, it's quite straightforward because it's obviously as accurate. It can be perfectly accurate. When you're doing it by hand, you really have to be careful. And the bigger that you can make the drawing, the better in terms of getting the accuracy if you're doing it by hand. And again, we just pick up the lintel height. And when I'm looking at the reveal, so you're not seeing this, it's a bit fiddly. So there's an opening, and there's the opening, and there's the next opening, and again here. And for the reveal, I'm going to take a little line back towards the vanishing point, the other vanishing point. And you will actually see the reveals of these openings. Okay, So I think you can see how it works there. And supposing this building was sat in the corner of the walled garden, for example, it would be a case of tracking that wall back. It's not really right. If I take the vanishing point to here, and if it had to be at the same height, it would be to there. Do that, and go to the other wall, take it here, to here, and you can add in landscaping detail as well. So supposing there was a patio in front of this, you can use vanishing points to set up where, that's not very accurate, but hopefully you can see what I mean there. And if there was, for example, a tree and plan, you might then actually include the tree as a feature in the drawing to bring it to life a little bit. I'm losing it now. But hopefully you can see actually how that works. Now in this drawing, I've got the perspective is actually being constructed on top of the plan. And that's fine when you're working by hand, because you can have the plan underneath, can be in the sheet underneath the next layer of tracing paper that you construct the perspective on. However, if you're working in CAD or you prefer to work on the same sheet and you're working by hand, what you can do is you can, here we are, have it again, set up the picture plane. The picture plane is in the same position as it was before, and all the same rules apply. So if I'm, if I set up the vanishing points, well, I'm ahead of myself actually. The picture plane is in the same position, but what we're suggesting here is that you take the ground plane above that. So you're actually taking the picture plane from previously, because it became the ground line in the previous example, above, and you're going to construct the drawing, the perspective drawing, on top of the plan or above the plan. So if this is the ground line, we then set up the horizon line above here, and then simply construct all the construction lines above. So for the vanishing point, we take a line parallel to the staging point. Where it hits the picture plane, then we take the line vertically until it hits the horizon line, and the same thing with the other series of planes. Take it up until it hits the horizon line here. So we've got our two vanishing points. And where we see the, well, I'll just do the first couple of steps. So if we're looking at that far corner, well, actually the first thing we do is set up the measuring line. So this corner here would be set up at this point. Okay, so we say that's the ground. This line is, let's say it was 3 meters or whatever it was, that's the corner. And if we're looking at tracking the sight line to the corner of the building here, where it crosses the picture plane, we take a vertical line up to where we're constructing the drawing, and then simply track back to the vanishing point. And same thing again. So, sorry. Same thing again, looking at this corner. So where it crosses the picture plane, it happens here. Take a line up there and track the corner back to the vanishing point. Same again here. And then that's setting up. So we're going through exactly the same process, but we've simply taken the drawing from above the plan, and we're constructing it above it, so you have a clear what's the word? Just a clean sheet above it. And that's easy to do in a CAD drawing as well. In this example, the external perspective you would wish to make is one that's looking into a courtyard space rather than looking at a corner of a building, for example. It's a different form. Same principles apply, so I'll go through it pretty quickly. So if we, section of this wing is above and the section of this wing is here. So at this point, I'm going to set my picture plane on the internal corner of that courtyard. Basically, you can set the picture plane anywhere as long as it intersects with a point in the building to allow easy measurement. I'm going to place my station point down here, looking directly into the corner of that courtyard. Next thing to do is set, I'm going to call the picture plane is also going to be the ground line, just because I haven't got any space to move the drawing above the plan. So I'll set the horizon line here. Next thing I'm going to do is set up the vanishing points. So parallel to that set of walls, directly up from the picture plane, vanishing point 1, same thing again, parallel to that series of walls, crossing the picture plane up onto the horizon line. Okay, so the measuring line is at the corner of that courtyard. Okay, and it's about 2 meters or 4 squares. So if I pick up the corner of the building here, crosses the picture plane at that point, and then it's happening on that line. Now, in order to get the correct height of that, I simply track the corner of the internal corner to vanishing point 2 in that way, and again here to there, and looking at this corner, sight line crosses the picture plane, project up, and to find out where that corner stops, we take the vanishing point this direction to here, similarly to here, and now I can say with confidence that that's one corner of the building, line here, okay. Now just to fill in the blanks, so if I look at this corner, crosses the picture plane, goes directly up, I take this corner back to that vanishing point and back to there, so it's going to be, it's quite foreshortened is how we would describe this. And in addition, this isn't a particularly helpful viewpoint probably, because actually there's a colonnade going on, so just about here, actually that's what's really happening. So this is where we're going to see that's what's happening in section. And on the other side, looking at this corner, sorry, it's so close, but I'm going to do that again. So I'm looking at that corner, it hits the picture plane, it's happening somewhere in that line. I track it back to the vanishing point here and here, but actually there's something different happening on the roof there, so I'm just going to leave that for the moment. Okay, let's look at how we position the openings, the colonnade. So I'm looking directly at this column, and where it crosses the picture plane it goes directly up, I'm going to look at the next one where it crosses the picture plane. It's directly vertical there. This one here. It's very bow shaped, but anyway. Here, and the last one. And if we take the lintel height, include from the measuring line, and we're tracking that back to the vanishing point here. Now, I haven't drawn this in any great detail, but you would be drawing it accurately. Instead of this dot, there would actually be a width of masonry here, and you would see the reveal of that masonry going back, and then you would see within that, behind there, you'd be able to see the ceiling. So hopefully you can see from this how you can set up an external perspective. Whoops. That's looking into a space rather than at the corner of a building. And by the time you've set it up accurately, you'll be able to track that piece back, and you would have the colonnade set up in this direction as well. So we've got openings here. So this is very sketchy, but I just wanted to show you that so that you don't get a bit baffled if you think when you're setting it up it doesn't exactly replicate what I showed in the previous one. So basically you can take your perspective from any point, and you simply follow the rules that are set up previously in previous video. Okay.